Hooray! Thanks for letting me know you wanted me to keep going. Some of you are very curious, like the doctor, and want to know some things about this spaceship and the Leechen and whether we make it on our mission to Venus. So we are going to continue our story. We're kind of reversing a little bit, and we're back to Perry in the galley and in a perilous situation with some boiling water in a vat, and it's dangerously looking like it's going to spill out on her. The vat tilted out even further, and a panic-stricken Perry made to leap away, but her effort was in vain. Unseen hands gripped her and held her there. No matter how she struggled, there was no escape. She could feel the numerous hands forcing her to remain in place. The vat tilted even further, and she could see steam beginning to release itself from the loosening top. She screamed for help, but there was no one to hear. Knowing nothing of this, the doctor stood to one side with Berrigan in the control room. "I trust you're watching your men," he murmured. "I always do," Berrigan said. "That's my job." "Then I suggest you keep doing it. Some of them are looking mutinous. There could be trouble." "Doctor, if you look carefully at me, you will notice that I carry a revolver at my side." The doctor accepted the sardonic tone of Berrigan's voice. "It would be difficult not to notice." "Well, it's there for a purpose. There are many strains in outer space work, and sometimes people give way beneath it. The first one to do so now will be shot by me." "I just thought I'd mention the fact." "And I thank you. Perhaps now you'd let me know why you don't seem to be afraid." The doctor waved the question aside. "I've too much to interest me. There's no time for fear. Panic, yes. Fear, no." Berrigan returned the smile. "I doubt I'll ever see either in you. You look to me like a born survivor." "Both with all the human foibles, sometimes more than most. Nonetheless, I'd keep an eye on the men if I were you." "I take your point." He glanced at his watch. "Your young friend seems to be taking a long time to prepare the coffee. That would help calm them down." "I'll go and see what she's about," the doctor said. But at that moment the speakers came into life. "Aaron, calling Medusa. Come in, please." "Medusa here," Berrigan replied. "Are you all right, Commander?" "Right as rain. Don't know what happened there. Some sort of interference, I suppose." "It sounded as though you were in trouble." "Not so, I assure you." Berrigan still had his doubts. "I'll have you up on video, if you don't mind." "By all means, proceed." Berrigan nodded to the operator, who flicked several switches. Onto one of the screens came a picture of Commander Wingfield. A cheerful face was his, looking as though nothing could shake the character behind it. "Am I clear?" "You are." "And you're satisfied that all's well?" "Yes." "Good. We're still making all speed, and we'll contact you again soon. Out." They saw Wingfield move away from the screen, and the operator flicked off the video. "I wonder what could have caused that interference," Berrigan said to the doctor. "I wonder," the doctor echoed quietly. "I'll go and see what Perry's up to." What Perry was up to was dangerously close, to an extremely nasty end. She was gasping with fear. The vat was nearly over now, its contents only a matter of millimeters from the tilting lip. Still her struggles were in vain. Still the unseen hands held her where she most definitely did not want to be. Her eyes bulged with terror. The doctor came in, took in her plight at a glance, and leapt forward, knowing that whatever was holding her must have a corporeal form in order to do so. His outstretched hands touched something, grasped, and viciously wrenched. There was a shrilling noise of pain, but he was not to be stopped. In his fury, his hands became like lightning calipers, grabbing he knew not what and flailing this way and that. His rage and haste knew no bounds. Whatever it was he was attacking, he cared not what damage it did to it. There was no time for finesse. His friend was in danger, and that was something he could not tolerate. He snatched, he tore, finding a strength he didn't know he possessed. Then he grasped her about the waist and gave a mighty heave. They staggered across the galley and came to a crashing halt against the bulkhead, both totally out of breath, and both staring at the vat. The last bolt sprang free. The vat tilted outwards, and its boiling contents cascaded onto the deck in exactly the place where Perry had been held. "I'd have been scalded to death," she gasped. "You would indeed," the doctor panted, still trying to recover from his unwanted exertions. "You can't have been closer, could you?" "But what was holding me?" The doctor surveyed the steam clouding the galley. "I'm not sure." He took her elbow. "I think we ought to get out of here. Can you manage?" "Yes, of course. But I haven't thanked you for saving me." "I suppose I should have left you there. Come on, this is not a good place to be." They made their way out. "You knew nothing of this. You were moving forward with Jackson towards the emergency steering system, but he tripped and went sprawling. He sat up and rubbed his shoulder, which had come into painful contact with the deck." "What the devil was that?" he wanted to know. "There was nothing you could see." "I've no idea. You moved forward to help him." "Loose objects are not permitted in a spaceship," he complained. He was wrong. A lever wrenched itself from the bulkhead and came hurtling toward you. It was only quick reflexes that saved you. It missed your head by no more than a fascination and clattered into a corner. "Keep down! It's starting again!" It did, but this time you were in a more confined space, and the flying objects were much more difficult to avoid. And this time they were heavier. Jackson was quite unable to rise, and you were buffeted painfully this way and that. It was complete bedlam. Jackson shouted with pain and passed out, an enormous gash across his forehead. You struggled to go to his aid, but you might as well have tried to make your way through a sandstorm of flying boulders, whipped up by a storm beyond human comprehension. It was mere moments before you, too, received a stunning blow to the head and fell into unconsciousness. The doctor, meanwhile, had helped Perry back to the control room, where he recounted what had happened. Berrigan listened in stony silence, only glancing at Perry to make sure she was all right. Things were getting beyond him. Here he was in command of a ship which refused to be controlled, a dilemma not of his own making. What was he supposed to do? Deep as they were in outer space, there was no escape. Yet he had a mission, and it was not within his nature to go back on it. He had risen to his present position from the lowest of the low, as was the practice then. In doing so, he had developed a will of iron and a philosophy which did not admit defeat. Yet here he was, confronted with a situation which bore all the hallmarks of exactly that. For once in his life, he did not know what to do. Yet the responsibilities of command forbade him from revealing that knowledge to anyone. The slightest sign of weakness or uncertainty could be the beginning of any manner of trouble. He rounded on Tedder. "How's our course, mister?" Tedder looked at the helmsman readout. "Still varying, sir." "And the pressure in the hold?" "The same, sir." "Then keep trying to get back both to normal." There was a silence. Tedder looked at the crew members about him, then back to his commander. "There is one thing I've noticed." "And what's that, mister?" "For as long as you try to hold this ship on the course you want, we get all this trouble." "So?" "So why don't we stop trying? That way we can find out what's required by whatever it is and be left in peace." There were murmurs of assent from most of the crew. They'd had enough, both of the situation and their commander. They feared they were close to death and could see no good reason for it. Berrigan's eyes were bleak. "Are you suggesting that I surrender my command to what looks to be a bunch of poltergeists?" "I'm suggesting, sir, that we can't fight what we can't see." Then I've got some information for you, mister. And this time he managed to make the obligatory mister sound like a term of contempt. I command this ship and I make all the decisions concerning it. Your opinion is usually one to which I pay a lot of attention, but this time your opinion isn't worth the breath you've wasted on it. We go on, mister. The Venus colony is depending on us, and besides, our troubles are nothing. Do I make myself clear? Tedder bit his lip and replied slowly. Yes, sir. Then get the men about their duties. Tedder obeyed, though clearly unhappy. Berrigan moved across to the doctor. From what you say, you're a man of some experience, doctor. You could say that, yes. Then what do you make of all this? Only that the few times I've encountered it, the ships concerned have never been heard from again. I say that for your ears only. It's not the sort of thing I'd tell your men. Please don't. I intend us to get through. It's a question of maintaining morale. Your news would not help. At that moment, you staggered in, bruised and shaken, having left Jackson for dead. You were not seeing clearly, your head spinning from the several blows it had received, but you could vaguely make out the figures about you. Perry rushed to your side to help you to a seat, and you explained as best you could what had happened. Your news was greeted with silence. After all, what more could anyone say? Who, in fact, could know which of them would be the next to go? The prospect was a fearsome one. But Tedder was nearing the edge of doubting his own senses. I've read a thing or two about poltergeists, he said. We don't want to hear it, mister, Berrigan said. But we should, Tedder persisted. The literature on it is quite extensive, and the burden of it is that poltergeists nearly always arrive through the person of a female. He was addressing the crew as much as he was Berrigan. Now, to the best of my knowledge, there's only one female on board this ship, and no one has the faintest idea where she came from. But I noticed that everything was fine until she appeared. Are you accusing me of causing all this? Perry demanded angrily. I'm simply passing on what I've read, Tedder replied carefully. You're insane, the doctor observed. I said this ship has been invaded, and I meant it. But by what? By something she's brought with her? I'm not listening to this nonsense. The doctor's right. You're deranged. Oh, it's quite normal, the doctor said cheerfully. Whenever there's trouble, it's only human nature to seek a scapegoat. And I'm not going to be it, Perry said heatedly. I'm not standing here listening to rubbish like this. No, you aren't, Berrigan said icily. I suggest you take your friend to the sick bay and tend to his wounds. He turned to Tedder. And you, mister, will keep your idiot theories to yourself. I do not permit anyone to be insulted in my presence, and least of all on my ship. Now get about your duties, or as God is my witness, you'll rue this day for a long time to come. Tedder avoided his commander's gaze, but nonetheless did as he had been ordered. Perry carefully helped you to your feet and led you out to the sick bay. There she seated you, located the first aid box, and took out ointments and sticking plasters. She was moving back to you when they were torn from her grasp and hurled across the cabin. She stared dazedly at you, then went to retrieve them. No sooner had she done so than the same happened again. The situation was hopeless. Whatever it was had no intention of permitting you to be treated. Not that it mattered too much, for your head had cleared by then, and your few wounds were nothing to bother you seriously, except for your head, still throbbing from where the missile had knocked you out. Leave it, Perry. It doesn't matter now. It does to me, she said. I think I'm going mad. Not you. You've always too much in control of yourself. Perhaps not so much at the moment. It's just possible that Lieutenant Tedder was right and I've been taken over by poltergeists or something like that. This was not like Perry at all, and you had no intention of standing by while she lost her spirit. You got to your feet. Nonsense. These incidents have happened in places you've never been, and to people you can't even claim to know. It all started when that meteorite hit. Were you to blame for that?" She shrugged hopelessly. "Right. Then let's get back." When you reached the control room, the atmosphere was tense. "I said you will try to keep our course, mister," Bergen was saying. "And I'm telling you that for as long as we do that, this trouble will continue. The only sensible thing to do is give up." "That's not in my nature." "It isn't in mine either, but I don't believe in going to the stake against the inevitable." You noticed that Tedder was deliberately not using the obligatory sir in addressing his commanding officer. That was not a good omen, nor did the fact that most of the crew had grouped themselves behind Tedder do anything other than fill you with foreboding. The doctor, meanwhile, was staring at Tedder as though reading his mind, which he probably was. "I would have thought that at a time like this, discipline and unity were vital," he observed. Tedder rounded on him. "Would you really? A sort of united we stand, divided we fall approach, is it? Well, it occurs to me that you yourself might just be as big a Jonas as Bergen here. With two of you aboard, it seems me, we don't stand a lot of chance." "Whatever you say," the doctor said indifferently. "And I'd remind you that I'm your commander and will be addressed as such," Bergen said. Tedder glanced about to make sure the crew were with him. You could see that they were. He returned his attention to Bergen. "Not any more, you aren't." "Do you know what you're saying, mister?" "Yes, I do, and I'm sorry about it, but I consider you to be so stubborn you're no longer fit to be in command. I therefore formally request you relinquish your office." Bergen was rigid with offended fury. "This is mutiny!" "So it is." "I'll have you court-martialed and clapped in irons for the rest of your life." "Oh, I doubt it." Tedder produced a pistol from his pocket and pointed it at the commander. "This says that I'm in command now, and when we get back to Earth, the crew will back me in my statement that you've taken leave of your senses. That's assuming that you ever get back, of course. There's lots of room and space for your body to stray about unnoticed."